Hello! In this short demo of AWS Single Sign-On, otherwise known as AWS SSO, I'll show you the seamless experience for an Azure Active Directory end user signing in to access all their assigned AWS accounts, roles, and business applications from one place. I'll also explain the configuration that connects Azure AD to AWS to enable access centrally across an AWS organization and to third-party SAML applications. You'll see how the user's credentials can remain in Azure AD and no passwords or other credentials need to be stored anywhere in AWS. Okay, I'm going to represent a fictitious person named Jamie Jenkins who is already an Office 365 user. Jamie comes to work in the morning and signs in to myapps.microsoft.com using her Azure AD username and password. Jamie's portal opens and you can see tiles for Jamie to access Office 365 tools including Outlook, Tasks, and Calendar. You can also see that Azure AD Administrator granted Jamie access to the AWS SSO user portal. Jamie opens the portal. Now you see that Jamie does not have to re-enter credentials to access AWS. This is because the administrator configured AWS SSO to use Azure AD as an external identity source. This is why AWS SSO can authenticate Jamie using SAML to confirm Jamie's identity with Azure AD. Now Jamie's identity is verified, and AWS SSO now presents her with a dynamically generated user portal that she would have seen by logging in directly. Let's first explore the AWS Account Tile. The admin gave Jamie access to two different AWS accounts, a production account and a staging account. Opening the tile, we can see Jamie has access to an EC2 admin role and a storage admin role in the production account. In the staging account, Jamie has access to the DB admin role and EC2 admin role. Jamie clicks on the EC2 admin role in the production account, and that takes Jamie into the AWS console in the production account while assuming the EC2 admin role. Jamie then chooses EC2. Once again, Jamie does not have to enter her username and password anymore. She just signs in once to Azure AD and can access everything she needed in AWS. Jamie is now in the EC2 console, where she can launch and manage EC2 instances. Importantly, you can see that the console status bar in the upper right shows that Jamie is using the EC2 admin role. It also shows Jamie's username from Azure AD as the user who assumed that role. Now note that Jamie could have a similar experience using the new AWS Command Line Interface version 2 that integrates with AWS SSO. Although I'm not showing it here, it is also noteworthy that if Jamie goes to the AWS SSO user portal or to the CLI v2 before signing into Azure AD, AWS SSO will redirect Jamie to Azure AD to sign in first. Going back to the AWS SSO user portal, note that Jamie's AWS SSO admin also set her up to use some other third-party applications, including JFrog, GoToMeeting, Slack, and others. From here, Jamie opens Datadog. And again, Datadog authenticates Jamie using SAML to AWS SSO, which verifies Jamie against Azure AD. With Datadog open, you'll notice in the lower left corner that it is J. Jenkins that is accessing Datadog. Jamie didn't have to sign in separately, and the Datadog access came from the AWS SSO user portal. This is a very seamless and simple experience for the end user. Let's take a look at how Jamie's administrator set this up. I'm signing into the AWS Management Console directly using the AWS admin credentials to get into the AWS SSO console. This is how I would bootstrap the SAML configuration, after which I could sign in to manage AWS SSO using an Azure AD identity. I select the AWS SSO console. Then I select Settings. Here you can see a new identity source setting that shows I'm using an external identity provider. If I select Change, I could choose to manage identities in AWS SSO or use Active Directory identities. And now I have the option to use an external SAML identity provider. If this was my initial configuration, the lower section is where I would get and set SAML metadata between AWS SSO and the IDP. Backing out to the settings page, you see that I have to set up authentication via the Open SAML standard. Here I can select View Details to see and modify the SAML configuration for AWS SSO and the identity provider. Going back to settings again, you can see provisioning is done via the Open Standard SCIM protocol. Selecting View Details, you see the SCIM endpoint URL and the bearer token that I provide to Azure AD. This enables Azure AD to automatically provision information into AWS SSO so that AWS SSO knows about Azure AD users and groups. This enables AWS SSO to configure access to AWS accounts, roles, and third-party applications before users sign in. Not shown in this demo, I used Azure AD to set up the AWS SSO user portal as a non-gallery application, configured the SAML and SCIM settings, and then granted a subset of my Azure AD users and groups access to the AWS SSO user portal. Going to the AWS SSO Users tab, I can see the list of users that I configured Azure AD to synchronize into AWS SSO. These users' credentials are still in Azure AD, which keeps them updated over time. Importantly, there are no passwords or other credentials anywhere in AWS. These remain in Azure AD, and AWS SSO redirects the users to Azure AD for authentication. With this single federation configuration in place and the users provisioned, I can then use AWS SSO to grant these Azure AD users and groups access centrally to any of my AWS accounts and any third-party applications that I want to control as an AWS administrator. In this video, I just demonstrated the seamless experience of an end user signing into AWS using their existing Azure AD identity and the configuration of AWS SSO that enables this experience. I also showed how leveraging open standards allows you to do that. If you'd like to learn more about AWS SSO and give it a try, you can visit the service page online at aws.amazon.com/sign-on. Thanks for watching.